Providence, Rhode Island, welcome to ParentCast. It's a podcast dedicated to new parents, new babies, and their new lives together. So listen and relax because it's free, it's funny, and it's a lot better than therapy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 19 of ParentCast. I'm your host, Mary Larson.
My name is Blake, and I may or may not regret my line about breastfeeding be a man's favorite dream.
What are you talking about, Blake?
I said this in the last podcast as we were closing the show out, and I thought it was a good idea, and I still think it's a good idea, but I'm not wholly convinced still.
For those of you who are tuning in the first time to ParentCast, or maybe you didn't get to listen to last week's episode, we're going to rewind and let you hear what happened last week and what Blake's talking about. That wraps up episode 18 of ParentCast. What do we have coming up for number 19, Blake?
A very special episode all about breastfeeding.
Ooh.
A man's favorite dream.
Ew. You're disgusting. Anyway.
Look, hey, get us the feedback. I know we didn't play all of it this week, but we will next week, I promise. And if it's good, we'll get it on the air. And if it sucks, well then, as always, you left out. Later.
I'm still grossed out by you. That was really gross.
What, guys can't like breastfeeding? What's the problem with that?
I mean, you can be proud of it and think that it's a great nourishment for a child, but
I think guys would like breastfeeding. I'm not going to lie.
I am so grossed out. That's what people on Craigslist do. I'm all set with you.
People on Craigslist get like peed on and stuff.
And
breastfeed?
Yeah, I think I'm going to sleep in a different room. Wow, yeah, I'm still pretty embarrassed by what you said.
Okay, all right. Listening to it afterwards, after the review on the play, the ruling on the field is overturned. I am a little embarrassed by that.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
But I thought it was a good idea at the time. I was just going with the flow. Come on, don't blame me. I'm just trying to provide a good show. I want to be entertaining here.
Well, you sure did entertain. Before we get into today's topic about breastfeeding, we just wanted to say thank you so much to all of the listeners who went and reviewed us on iTunes.
Yes, thank you so much.
We're so thankful that you do this, and it really helps promote the show. We wanted to give a good shout out to Beth Ann. She said that Mary and Blake are adorable. Mm-hmm. Oh, she probably didn't listen to last week's episode if she's saying that about you. I would write Mary's adorable and Blake is nasty. Anyway, Beth Ann says they obviously have a great time together and they're funny too. I've never heard such a professional couple before, but yet at the same time, they're natural and unrehearsed. I love the roundtable discussions they have with friends who don't have kids yet or to get the dad side of things. It's a really creative format, super entertaining and fun. I highly recommend it for any expecting couples or couple with babies or young kids at home. Super fun. Keep up the good work, Mary and Blake.
Well, Beth Ann, thank you very much for those very kind words. We are humbled. We are very thankful. And of course, as always, I know my opinion matters most. So the round table with the dads and everything about me, it's just superior. I can't help it. I'm sorry.
Well, with that, we're going to step into the judgment-free zone.
Boom. What do you say, Marvin? What do you got?
For those of you who don't know, Blake sometimes calls me Marvin because I'm hungry, so he likes to call me Starvin' Marvin. So if you're getting confused at home saying, I thought her name was Mary, it is. I don't know.
It's Marvin.
Anyway, what did you just ask me?
What's your judgment-free zone, you hoop?
My judgment-free zone story revolves around feces.
Really?
Yes. So on the 4th of July, I went to a friend's house and she has a dog.
Yeah,
and I was hanging out, walking after my kid, and all of a sudden I stepped in something squishy and soft, and I thought it was a kid's toy, but instead it was like a really long dog turd. My friend was mortified, absolutely mortified, and I could have cared less. Normally I would have been really grossed out, but the thing that I was so happy about was that this poop was intact. Because that meant that my kid didn't eat the poop.
There wasn't like little poop bits all over the floor.
It was like the full thing was there, granted on my foot, like a big Tootsie Roll, but it meant my kid didn't eat it. So I thought I left poop behind. But this morning, I went to go get my son, and he had taken his diaper off in his sleep, and he had his butt up in the air and was happy as can be. So I went to go put him in his crib later today. And when I went to go get him, I found poop all in his crib.
Everywhere?
Well, like a lot of it. And I still to this moment don't know if that was poop from last night that maybe he left in there and I just didn't see in the chaos of this morning, or if the cat in the 2 minutes that I left him alone in his crib, if the cat went in and pooped in there.
All right, let's talk about, because obviously I know about this and you guys are just learning about it right now, but let's talk about what happened when I came home. And what did you say to me? Do you remember what you said to me?
Yes, I said, did you bring home quarters? Because Blake and I live in the ghetto and we have quarter machines. No, that is definitely the first thing I asked you.
No.
I've asked for quarters for a few days. And I said, did you get quarters? And he said, no, why? And I said, go into your son's room. And he said, why? And I said, just go into your son's room and see why we really could have used those quarters.
All right, well, let's also talk about when I came out of the room and I discovered that it was poop. I went to go talk to my beautiful wife about this. And what did she say? Hey, go back in there and take a look at the poop and decide whether or not it's from the cat or from a human. I'm sorry. How? Am I the poop expert? Am I the resident feces expert?
I feel like anyone could really look at it. And, you remember that scene from Jurassic Park where she's like shoving her hand in it? That's what I expected you as the man to do. I expected you to like analyze it and see if there were blueberries and peas or if it was cat food.
Listen, if the poop was as large as the poop as it was in Jurassic Park.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
I could pretty much tell you that would be from a dinosaur. But the little poops from the cat and the little poops from the kid, it's pretty much the same thing. I'm not going to lie.
I'm banking on the fact it was the cat. That's what I'm just going to decide.
I hope it was the cat because I didn't see any poop in that crib this morning.
I didn't either.
Unless our kid magically got in the crib and just
But now there's...
I don't know, how would it get in there?
But now the bigger concern is, why did the cat, out of all places, decide to poop in the kid's crib? Because this cat has been great so far. So this is my really long, I'm apologizing, extremely long judgment-free zone story. And the thing that I need to close with is that things come in threes. And I don't know what the last poop incident is going to be this week. I'm a little nervous.
It's going to be in your pillow.
Oh, stop it. I'm going to keep the door closed so the cat can't come visit me.
I'm hexing you.
Ugh. Well, now that I'm hexed, why don't we talk about today's topic? It is breastfeeding. Blake, just take a moment, find your chi, and be totally mature for a little while. Deal?
I'm not sure if I can do that.
Well, we need you to, because breastfeeding sometimes helps the world go round. Stop it. Stop giving me those eyes.
Okay, fine.
Just
I will keep my composure.
Get the giggles out right now. We are done with the giggles.
I'm done, I swear.
We're having a serious discussion today about breastfeeding, and we actually called in an amazing lactation consultant, Kathy Moren from Healthy Babies, Happy Moms, and Kathy saved the day for me. I was having some serious issues when I was in the early days of breastfeeding race, and Kathy's advice not only saved my kid, but saved my sanity to some degree. I mean, I'm still not totally back, but she saved my sanity. So I cannot wait for you guys to hear all of the fantastic knowledge she has. So without further ado, let's bring her on in. All right, so joining us is Kathy Moren. She's a registered nurse and board-certified lactation consultant. She's also the owner of Healthy Babies, Happy Moms Incorporated, which is a licensed and accredited home nursing care agency and durable medical equipment provider specializing in breastfeeding support. Thanks for coming in, Kathy.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us just quickly how you got started in being a lactation consultant and also how you got started with Healthy Babies, Happy Moms.
Okay, I am a registered nurse, and I worked in a neonatal intensive care unit in Chicago for about 10 years immediately out of college. And at that time, I was the first among my peers to have a baby and actually breastfeed him. And so in the NICU, you're dealing with a lot of breastfeeding moms, and all the young single girls didn't want to deal with them. And so they would pass them off to me all the time. Talk to Kathy Moren about breastfeeding. So that's kind of when I became interested in it. And eventually I had a second son, and I left the NICU and went to home health nursing. And during that time, I had a very supportive boss who paid for me to become board certified as a lactation consultant. Then I also worked for a corporate consulting firm that specialized in lactation and employee programs. And then I was transferred to Rhode Island 15 years ago. And at that point, I had 3 sons. And so when I moved to Rhode Island, one of those companies gave me their East Coast clients to handle. And I started my own company out here, modeled after the 2 companies that I worked for in Chicago.
I can't believe that you are able to juggle all that and 4 boys. So way to go.
Well, yeah, I don't know that I do it well all the time, but it's fun. Definitely is fun.
Kathy, talk to me, and just very briefly, about the benefits of breastfeeding and what's good about it for the mom and what's good about it for the baby.
Okay. I think most people are familiar with the prevention of allergies. The longer a baby is breastfed and exclusively breastfed, the lower the incidence of allergies. And nowadays there's so many allergies. I don't know, it seems a lot more so than when my kids were little and certainly when I was little. So that's one good benefit. And then there's also the infection prevention, because of all the antibodies that mom has that are passed along to the baby and help keep them healthy and free from infection. There's also a long list of diseases into adulthood that breastfeeding is attributed to decreasing. Some that I can think of off the top of my head are like Crohn's disease, even diabetes, obesity. MS, I believe, is one of them. Some of the lymphomas and leukemias. I hope I'm being accurate, just thinking those off the top of my head, but there's quite a range of diseases that are believed to be prevented by exclusive breastfeeding through a year.
So let's say that the mom has the baby and everything, she's decided that she wants to breastfeed. Of course, everybody else has their own reasons for doing it or not doing it. That's on them. That's okay, obviously. But if she decides and is the baby hungry right away after birth? Like, is it supposed to feed immediately, or what's that like?
That's a very good question. So actually, when a baby is born, in the first 4 hours after birth, they are wide awake. Okay, and they're in what's called a quiet alert state, where they're just like awake and hanging out and looking around. And it was always my favorite time as a nurse in the delivery room to see the babies like that, because like their father speaks and they like get whiplash looking to try to hear that voice that they've been hearing for 9 months. They're just very, very alert. And that's the perfect state to feed a baby in, okay? And usually, if things go well, a baby will nurse twice in those 4 hours, immediately after birth, and then maybe a couple hours later. And then after that, they conk out or sound asleep for about 18 hours maybe. And so it's during that, 18 hours or so that we're telling parents you need to wake the baby up and feed them every 3 hours, because honestly, if you don't, they won't eat. They're pretty much, good little babies. Everybody's like, oh, my baby's so good and quiet. But so they are hungry when they are born, and they do need to be fed immediately if you can manage it. But that being said, sometimes it doesn't work out that way, and that doesn't mean that all is lost if you don't get to nurse your baby immediately after birth.
So you're saying that the baby is born hungry, which is obviously if you can breastfeed and if you've made that choice to do it. But then are you also saying that if you don't wake the baby up, or if you're not feeding it every 2 or 3 hours, they won't like desire that food? You have to physically bring them to the breast?
You do. They may wake subtly and root, but they're not really that vigorous a lot of times in that first 12 to 18 hours after birth. And they do need to be woken pretty regularly, or many times they will just sleep. And if you really want to get breastfeeding off to a good start, you do need to wake them at least every 3 hours in those first couple of days to get things going.
I got to tell you, I kind of miss that idea that the baby would just sleep now that we have this 11-and-a-half-month-old who doesn't doesn't sleep for more than an hour.
Yeah. Well, and parents in the hospital, you have so many visitors, you've just had the baby, so you're tired, and everybody is like, wow, this baby's so good. He sleeps really well in the beginning.
Yeah, little do they know.
Then you have a kid like mine who's way too cool to sleep.
Right. Did you hear my phone going off? I'm sorry.
It's a dance party.
I know. There we go. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
But what typically happens is they're awake for those 4 hours, okay? Then they kind of sleep for a good 18 to 24 hours. I would say maybe it's more like 24 to 36, okay? And then they wake up with a vengeance. And when they wake up, it usually coincides with the mom being discharged from the hospital. So the parents get home, and all of a sudden this kid that was a little sleepyhead is now wide awake, and the mom is convinced that her baby is starving because his behavior now is completely different from the way it was in the hospital.
I feel like the nurses, as they wave goodbye to you, they say, sucker. Like
I know. I know. And I get that call all the time. They're like, oh, my God, this kid was so good in the hospital, and now I can hear the kid screaming on the phone, And I think if parents knew that that's totally normal, they would stress a lot less, and it's actually a really good sign. It usually means that the mom's milk is coming in about 6 to 12 hours, okay? In that time, right before the milk comes in, they get like crazy hungry. It's almost like they know it's coming, but it's not coming fast enough. But it's very troublesome for parents because they're just getting home, taking care of the baby by themselves for the first time, and the baby that was nice and quiet is now demanding pretty vigorously to be fed.
I think people listening to this, they're going to have so much ease now hearing that you said that because...
I hope so.
Yeah. So,
yeah, there's so much, if you just know what's normal, it makes things so much easier,
I completely agree.
You don't worry as much.
So rewinding back, right after birth and mom has the baby, I was wondering if there's any medications, if they were used during the birthing process, that could be unsafe for breastfeeding. For example, sometimes people are on pain medicine. I myself ended up needing an epidural, for example. Is there anything that could happen during birth that the mother would be ingesting that would not be safe for right away breastfeeding?
So pretty much anything that you are given in the hospital is safe for breastfeeding, okay? All the anesthetics that are used are very short-acting. So they wear off pretty quickly. And as a result, really don't pass along to the baby, okay? And I really believe that in the hospital, they're very good about making sure that anything they give to a mom who is pregnant or is planning to nurse is safe for the baby. Are there some drugs that in emergencies or something like that might be used that would be dangerous for the baby? Possibly, but I don't really know the answer to that question. I think that the general drugs that are given, even the pain medicines that moms are sent home with, have really been tested to be safe for the baby. It's not like when you take Tylenol with codeine, that the codeine sits in your breast and waits there until the baby gets it out. It's actually filtered over time pretty rapidly, so that even if you think of it like having a glass of wine, when you first have the glass of wine, you might feel it, but as time passes, that feeling goes away. And the same filtering that goes on in the brain goes on in the breast, so that the longer the time goes between when you've ingested the drug and the baby actually nurses, the less effect it has on the baby.
So you mentioned anesthetics and pain medicines.
Yep.
So let's talk about a woman, let's just say for the sake of argument, she has a C-section. Can she breastfeed, and when should she start? Is it a different process?
So a woman who's had a C-section can breastfeed, and she can breastfeed immediately following birth in that 4-hour window that I described with a vaginal birth. Okay? And And in most institutions, I know especially here at Memorial Hospital, where they're doing like a gentle C-section, they get those babies on right away, okay? Is a little bit more challenging, definitely, just to maneuver your body, and get the baby to you. But you have a lot of help, and it absolutely can be done. And moms who've had a C-section should, try to do exactly what their plan was when they had a vaginal birth, if possible. It might be a little bit more difficult, but for many women, it's not difficult at all. So I don't want people to assume that because they've had a C-section, they can't do it.
Great. Now, say baby's out, everyone's happy and healthy. What exactly should the schedule be for the first few days? And particularly, I know you were saying, every 2 or 3 hours, and especially making sure if the baby's sleeping. How long should each feeding be?
Okay. So in those first couple of days, you really do want to feed the baby at least every 2 to 3 hours. The baby has to have so many feedings in 24 hours, and we want the baby to get them mostly during the day, so that maybe you might get a stretch of 3 or 4 or 5 hours of sleep at night, okay? So if parents are really good about waking the baby every 2 to 3 hours to eat during the day, they tend to get a longer stretch of sleep at night. If they let the baby take a 5-hour nap during the day, then they're going to be feeding the baby every 2 hours at night. So really waking the baby in those first few days is important to get your milk supply established, to get the baby pooping and peeing, and to get the whole process started. So when a mom does nurse, ideally what we want is about 10 to 20 minutes of active sucking and swallowing on each side, okay? And the key words there are the active sucking and swallowing, because just having the baby there not doing anything doesn't count. That's not a feeding.
So if the kid's awake, though, and let's say even if you take them home, or if you have a girl, whatever, if you take them home, I mean, how can you tell that the kid's hungry? I mean, I know you have the requisite, crying and everything, but are there any other cues that the kid does to let you know that he's starving?
Yep. A lot of times they will suck their hand, suck their tongue. They'll root, like if even if like dad picks them up, they'll turn their head toward the breast. They don't care whose breast it is.
Oh, that's creepy. I don't think I could do that.
Yeah. They'll turn and try to latch onto whatever's there. Okay. And certainly crying is generally a late indication of hunger in these first couple of days. It's really that quiet, alert state that you're looking for, that where they're starting to stir, but they're not crazy crying. Do you want to grab them like before they start crying? Like, is it a good thing to? Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to get to a brand newborn before they start crying.
Now, when are they no longer this brand newborn baby that needs to eat every 2 or 3 hours?
Okay. So the key to that, and if I can say one more thing about that every 2 to 3 hours, the 2 to 3 hours, the clock starts at the beginning of the feeding. Okay? So if you feed your baby at 8 o'clock and you're done feeding at 8:30, the next feeding should be at 10 or 11, okay, 2 to 3 hours later. And if for some reason the baby wakes up instead at 9:30 and wants to eat again, and you feed the baby again at 9:30, an hour and a half after you last fed him, then that resets the clock. And then you're looking at feeding the baby again, at 11:30 or 12:30. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so just because you've stopped feeding the baby at 9:30, that it does reset the clock, but it doesn't reset it to 11:30. It resets it to when the kid when he first woke up, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
The beginning of the feeding. It's from the beginning of this one feeding to the beginning of the next one.
Which I remember being frustrated, honestly, about that, because I would feed about 20 minutes on each side, and then it almost felt like I had to feed him all over again. Like I maybe got to put him down in his little crib or, hold on to him for a second, then all of a sudden, it's 10 o'clock, you need to feed your baby again. And I was like, I just finished.
I know. That's the 2-hour feedings get really close together, especially if you're feeding for 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's like you've got an hour and then you got to do it again. But the thing is, this only happens in really the first couple of days when you're trying to get everything well established. Okay, your baby will have something called cluster feedings as they get like later in that first week and further on, where they may eat, at 9 o'clock, at 10:30, at 11:30, and at 1. Okay, so they've had 4 feedings in 4 hours. Okay, but then they'll conk out for a good long nap. And that's very normal. That's called cluster feeding, and they tend to do it before and after a long stretch of sleep. But you won't see that in the brand newborn phase, like the first couple of days. You'll see that happen after the milk comes in.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what that exactly means when the milk comes in?
Sure. So, a mom's milk usually comes in sometime between 2 and 4 days, depending on whether she's had a vaginal delivery or C-section. Moms who've had a C-section, their milk usually comes in later. Okay, like it's more on I would say the 4 to 5 days, if a mom has had a C-section. And what will happen is that initially, maybe 24 hours before the milk actually comes in, her breasts will start to feel somewhat heavy. Okay, she just kind of notices that they're starting to feel a little bit heavy. As time progresses, they might actually be hard. They might start to get hard and feel really full with milk. For some women, that's very, very pronounced and uncomfortable. For other women, it's just like, oh, yeah, I can feel it, but it's not that big of a deal, okay? But it's all good. It's a good sign. I just try to be so positive when that happens, because it's usually things really change for the better then, because what's happening is when your baby is first born and is getting colostrum, they're literally getting drops or teaspoons full of milk, okay? And if you compare it to formula, I'm not sure exactly what the ratio is, but, a breastfed baby might get 2 or 3 teaspoons of colostrum, whereas a formula-fed baby might get 2 ounces of formula, okay? And calories, protein, and fat, it's all the same, okay? Except that obviously the breast milk has all those other good qualities to it. But what's missing from the breast milk is the water, okay? And so when a mom's milk comes in, the actual water comes in with it, okay? So that the volume dramatically increases. So this baby that was getting teaspoons is now getting ounces, and they are much more satisfied than they were in that little 12-hour window that I spoke about earlier, where they're like crazy crying hungry.
What exactly is colostrum? I mean, just for, ignorant guys like me.
Sure. It's the first milk that a mom makes, and it's actually, they have it, before the baby's even born. Most women, if they squeeze their nipples, they'll see it. It's very thick and yellow, and it is full of just tons of nutrients. And it's especially important that babies get that first milk because it does a lot to coat their intestines and also help get all that meconium, that black tarry stool, out of them quicker. So it's just very, very high in nutrition, but in very, very small quantities. And it's it's almost like a golden color. And when the milk comes in, the milk looks like milk. It's actually white. And sometime in between, you have kind of this yellow milk. And you'll see that as it gets to mature milk, it gets white, just like we all think of milk.
So when moms get their milk in, I imagine it could be kind of uncomfortable for them,
yes.
for some moms. I mean,
yes.
Get all this stuff coming out of you. I don't know,
right. Right.
So what can they do? What can they do to like alleviate that discomfort?
Mind you, Blake was not feeling bad for me at all when I had these insanely big breasts when my milk came in.
I didn't really have a problem with that.
Feeling bad about it. Yeah, most men are feeling bad about it.
But I had a problem.
Pretty good. Yeah. But there's a couple things you can do. The first thing is, the best thing to do is to nurse your baby, okay? Because as that milk gets out, you're going to have instant relief, okay? And this period of engorgement where the milk comes in, where a mom might be uncomfortable, really only lasts for about 12 hours. And then things kind of settle back to normal, okay? So the first thing she should do is nurse the baby, and if she massages her breast while the baby is nursing, she can feel those hard areas just disappear kind of right underneath the fingertips, okay? Another thing that women can do is to either use heat or cold on their breasts. Like some people will take frozen vegetables and throw a pack of frozen vegetables on their breasts because that's very comforting. Other women prefer heat, but I kind of think the heat exacerbates the engorgement personally. I could be wrong about that, but I think it increases the circulation and increases the volume of fluid to your breasts. And one thing that women, I think, don't realize is when your breasts are really big and full like that, everybody thinks that fullness is from milk, but a lot of it is water. It's just plain old swelling, okay? And so women will get very, very discouraged because they feel like they should be able to get all of that out, but you don't get it all out because a lot of it is just water that needs to be reabsorbed and will be reabsorbed over the course of 24 hours.
So you're saying I should pack in a big bag of frozen peas in the bag I bring to the hospital?
Well, this probably isn't going to happen while she's in the hospital. It's going to happen when she gets home. So you probably don't need to bring the peas to the hospital. But the other thing you can do, that moms can do, if the baby nursing does not relieve some of that heaviness and discomfort, is to pump after you feed the baby. And if you pump, you should pump just enough to make yourself comfortable, not to try to get everything out. Because like I said before, a lot of what's in there is just extra water swelling, and you're never going to get that out. So you want to pump really just enough to make yourself comfortable, to get rid of those hard, lumpy areas if you have them, and then stop. Because if you pump a lot, it's going to be a signal to your body that it's got twins or triplets to feed, and you're going to go into overdrive making milk.
No fun whatsoever. I actually remember
you had that problem.
Oh yeah, I can attest to that. That was terrible, and I didn't even really pump. I do remember the day my milk came in, and I tried the cold compresses. I tried to massage, and nothing was helping me. And I felt like my breasts were kickballs, like they were so hard that Reese couldn't latch on. So I actually used the pump in the beginning to almost, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but to break the seal. I felt like I just needed to get a little bit out so that the poor thing could latch on at all.
Right. That's actually very good advice because some people, their breasts are so full and hard you couldn't even begin to get the baby on. And so you do need to pump first in that situation and kind of get your breasts softened up and then feed the baby.
Next question. We were wondering what resources there are for the first couple of days for these new moms in the hospital regarding breastfeeding.
So there should be lactation consultants in any hospital that you deliver at in Rhode Island. And you should ask to be seen immediately if you can. Sometimes your doctor needs to write an order in order for you to be seen. But certainly they have them in the hospitals, and they're there to help you. And fortunately now, too, most of the nurses are pretty well educated in breastfeeding as well. And if you're having trouble, you really need to advocate for yourself to get the help that you need, because it's available if you ask for it, I hope and I think.
Now, a lot of mothers that I spoke to before I had a baby who tried breastfeeding said that sometimes it was painful for them. And I also know that on the flip side, you're told it's not supposed to be painful. So why would it have been painful for some people?
Okay, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, I absolutely want everybody to know that breastfeeding is not supposed to hurt. And if it hurts, it's a sign that something is not going well, and it needs to be fixed, okay? And there's usually a couple of reasons for moms being in pain when they're nursing. The first reason, I think, is that the baby is not aligned properly on the breast, okay? Most people think, and it makes sense, even as I'm saying it, that the baby should go on with their mouth like a bullseye, right onto the breast, okay? And if you do that, it actually hurts like the dickens. It really does. You actually want your baby's nose where your nipple is, okay? And if you do that and you tickle the baby that way, they're going to tip their head back, and then you bring them on. So if you bring the baby on with their head tipped back and their chin hitting first, that is how you get a latch that doesn't hurt, okay? In addition, moms need to make sure that the chin and both cheeks are touching the mom's breast, okay? If you do that, you usually get a deep enough latch. If you can see the nipple at all, that usually means the latch is not deep and the baby's gums are catching the nipple and causing the mom a considerable amount of pain.
Ouch, yeah.
Yeah. And there is a fantastic video on Dr. Jack Newman's website, Newman. If you Google him and go to his website and look for the videos, he has videos of getting a brand newborn to latch. And I think it's so helpful to watch somebody else do it than to have me explain it to you. Those videos are great. I've had so many moms tell me when I show them to them, like, I get it now. I see what I'm supposed to be doing because you're watching somebody else do it. Another thing that causes moms pain is that they'll get the baby to latch on. It feels great. They're all good. And then they drop their breast. They let go of the breast that they were holding when they got the baby to latch. And if you think about it, if your breast is big and heavy and full of milk, and your baby is latched onto it, and the baby is pulling the nipple one way, and then you drop the breast, the weight of your breast is going to pull that nipple out of the baby's mouth. But the baby's not going to let go, okay? And that's where moms get a lot of pain. And if I will tell them, put your hand back in there and lift up your breast higher than you think you should, and they'll feel the pain go right away. And then lastly, another reason that moms hurt sometimes is because they're not supporting the baby on a pillow of some sort. They are getting tired, and the baby is kind of coming off the breast but still latched to it, if that makes any sense. So if having really good support underneath the baby in the mom's arms makes a big difference as well. And then lastly, there are some anatomical issues that could cause pain in the mom, but they're very rare. But if the pain is persisting, the moms really need to get it checked out because all those other things that I mentioned are so easy to fix. And I see it all the time when I work with moms. I'll just give them a few pointers, do this, do that, move the baby this way, and they're like, oh my God, it doesn't hurt. And I think if moms knew, there's another video on Jack Newman's website showing a pinched nipple. And when you look at that video, you'll see that when your nipple is pinched, no milk comes out of the breast. Okay? Literally just like drops. Okay? And I think if moms knew that when their nipples are being hurt like that their baby wasn't getting milk, they wouldn't do it. But most of them are so happy the kid's finally on that they are just like, oh, he's on. I'm just going to sit here and suffer through it because he's on. But if he's going to be on, you want him to be effective and actually getting milk. And so really getting a good latch that's pain-free is key to that.
Now, these latches, the latch that you're talking about and these common problems that new mothers have, is this something that lactation consultants and nurses who are at the hospital, can they see this from the naked eye? Like, would you be able to say, oh, yeah, the latch isn't correct? Is there something that they can see?
Yes, I think so. At least I can usually see it. There have been times where the latch looks beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And the mom will tell me it hurts like crazy. Okay? And then I'll do my usual tricks to, I want you to hold the baby closer. I want you to lift up the breast. I want you to tip the baby's head back. And usually those things will make it better. Okay? But if it doesn't, then a lot of times I look for anatomical issues that might be causing the problems. And then those need to be addressed.
So since there's ways that that you or other lactation consultants can see, is there some ways that a dad or a partner could even help during breastfeeding?
Yes. Well, I think first of all, it sounds silly, but changing the diaper is a huge help. You know, dads should just be on diaper duty all the time, as best as they can. Making sure that mom has a nice glass of water next to her every time she's nursing and that she's well fed. And I think dads are really instrumental in making sure that moms get enough sleep, that visitors are kept to a minimum. I think sometimes dads have to be the ones to say, you know what, enough. We've had too many visitors, you've been up too long, you need to go to bed. We're going to feed the baby one more time, and then off you go, and I will take care of the baby, and if the baby needs to eat, I'll let you know. I think those are really the ways dads can be most helpful. When I do a consult in the home or even in the office and the dad comes with, I always have the dad take pictures, and I show them what I'm looking for and what's correct. And I have them take the pictures because a lot of times when I leave or when they get home, they can't remember what I've showed them. And so if they have the picture to look at the mom nursing comfortably, and they'll remember, oh yeah, she put a roll under the baby's head, or oh yeah, I had both of my shoulders facing forward, and when I got home, I was my body was kind of twisted. They're pretty much able to figure it out themselves. And a lot of times it's the dads looking at what's going on, and they can see what the mom's doing, but the mom can't see it. And they are very, very helpful in that way.
I know one of the best ways that Blake helped me, we're talking about having a good latch, and that's, the mouth position of the baby, is that while I would feed, I would often ask Blake to look over or even like shine a little flashlight if it was late at night. And I would ask him to see if the latch was okay, because we were told that the baby needed to have, like duck lips, like his lips needed to be completely out. How would you even say that? Because we just called it duck lips.
Yeah, or fish lips even kind of, just like it's really wide with the lips curled out. If the lips are curled in or the mouth is not open wide, it's going to hurt, and you'll know that something's not right.
All right, so if we're going to delve in a little bit more into the breast milk, I know that there was a different, there was like a foremilk, and then there's a hindmilk. So can you tell me the difference between that?
Sure. So the foremilk is what the baby gets initially when the baby's nursing, and think of it as skim milk. Like if you go buy a gallon of skim milk, that's what it looks like. Okay, it's watery. Okay, and it has a higher sugar content than the hind milk. Okay, the hind milk is thick and creamy, and it looks like cream, and it has a lot of fat in it. And there's more foremilk than there is hind milk. All right, in any given feeding. But the hind milk is what makes your baby in that like little drunken sailor state, where they get to a certain point in feeding where their hands start to open up, their arms relax, their body relaxes. And that's how you know that they've gotten the hind milk and that the feeding on that side is pretty close to over.
Oh, that makes sense. That was actually my next question, is how you knew they were having enough. So that's when they would just get nice and tired. They kind of look like how I do on Thanksgiving after I've eaten enough.
Exactly.
All right.
Like a little drunken sailor. You can pick up their arm and drop it, and they doesn't even faze them.
Awesome.
Okay? And that's how you know, because in the beginning of every feeding, your baby's going to have their fists clenched. They're going to be a little bit frantic. Their arms are going to be flexed. And as the feeding progresses, you're going to see them start to relax and get really sleepy. And if you've been hearing really good swallowing, you'll know that when they get to the hind milk, because they're pretty much out of it.
Now, once they finish on one side and once they're drunken sailor, are we supposed to switch them to the other side, or how should we be balancing the boobs, I guess?
Yep. You absolutely should switch them to the other side. So I would feed the baby for about 10 to 20 minutes on the first side, or until he gets to that drunken sailor state, okay? And then take him off, and that's when you want to change the diaper, okay? Mm-hmm. You can burp the baby, change the diaper, changing the diaper will wake them up a little bit for the second side, and they usually go right to the second side and take it without a problem, okay? If you change the diaper before the feeding, you are going to have a very angry baby that you're trying to get to latch. So this kind of goes back to that quiet, alert state. If you see that, you just want to pick the baby up and feed him. Don't change the diaper beforehand because it's just going to make them mad. If you do it in between sides, your baby's tank is half full, they're happy, they'll lay there on the changing table and look up at you and they'll be perfectly fine. Another thing I should mention is that a baby that is exclusively breastfed does not need to have his diaper changed. And I know you're thinking, well, what kind of parent wouldn't change their baby's diaper if it was dirty? But that would be a tired parent at 3 o'clock in the morning who's just had a fabulous feeding and their baby's finally gone to sleep, and all of a sudden they hear a big explosion in the baby's pants. Okay? If the baby is asleep and happy in the poopiest diaper you could ever imagine, you do not have to change it. When babies are getting exclusively breast milk, the pH of their stool is such that it doesn't bother their bottom at all. Once you give them formula, you have to change their diaper, okay? But if they're getting breast milk and they're sound asleep and they're perfectly happy, even though their pants are dirty, just leave them alone.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I think so many parents make more work for themselves because they're constantly changing the diapers because they think they have to, and you really don't have to.
Man, I miss those days. Now that we're on to solid foods, it's change it when you smell it. So.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. It's bad.
So I was wondering if there's any kind of foods that moms should be avoiding, anything that they should be eating more of, or anything that if they ingest it could actually dry their milk up. Is there anything that we have to worry about?
So, in general, I tell moms to eat whatever they ate when they were pregnant, okay? And that includes, I know nowadays people don't eat soft cheeses, deli meats, sushi. I think all that stuff is fine now to eat when you've had your baby, okay? If your baby starts exhibiting any kind of problems, that's when you can start eliminating stuff, all right? And dairy is usually the biggest problem, and it's usually only a temporary problem. And I would tell moms not to change their diet at all without talking to a lactation consultant first, okay? Because sometimes it's the way you're feeding your baby that's making them fussy, and we can figure it out, and then you don't have to change your diet at all. It's very, very rare that people have to eliminate food based on a food allergy or anything like that. So don't assume that you should. I can't think of anything in particular that you need to avoid, except for a lot of sage. Sage does a great job of drying the milk supply up. So if you're somebody that eats a lot of sage, realize that it might have an impact of decreasing your milk supply.
And how about things that we should be eating more of to help out that milk supply?
Oatmeal is great. Beer is also good. Flaxseed, ground flaxseed is good. What else?
I'm going to stop you right there because you said beer. Now, a lot of people would think, what do you mean beer? You're breastfeeding.
So yeast, the brewer's yeast in beer really helps to increase your milk supply. And so having beer in most cultures is really recommended to increase your supply.
How much beer should we be having?
You're not going to have a six-pack, okay? But certainly one beer every night would be fine. The reality of it is most moms won't be able to tolerate more than that. You know, if you've gone 9 months without drinking anything, having one beer is probably going to be all you could handle. But beer does really make a difference for a lot of women. They really notice if they have a beer at night, it makes a difference in their supply.
Oh, that's great. And then what are some common breastfeeding problems among new moms, just in general, that they can keep an eye out for?
Well, I think the pain is the biggest thing, okay? And then a baby who's not gaining weight would probably be my second biggest problem that I see most often, okay? And so the key to that problem, I think we talked enough about the pain. The key to making sure that your baby is gaining weight is to monitor their urine and stool output. They should really be, once the mom's milk comes in, they should be peeing at least 6 to 8 times a day, and they should have 3 to 5 poopy diapers, okay? And that really is that's the low end of normal. Most babies do much more, okay? And the stool should be yellow and seedy once the milk comes in, all right? And the mom should also hear and see that the baby is really swallowing well when the baby nurses. And she should have a noticeable change in her breasts, that they feel full before the feeding and lighter afterwards, okay? And if a mom notices all that stuff, then she's pretty confident that everything is going fine, okay? If some of those things are missing, she needs to have her baby's weight checked. And to do it sooner rather than later. Or make an appointment with a lactation consultant, go to your pediatrician, whatever works for you. But just get it checked out, because the most important thing is to get breastfeeding off to a good start. If you keep waiting and waiting, I'll wait and see how it goes another day, you are jeopardizing your supply. You really have a limited window of opportunity to get things going correctly based on, your hormones after delivery. And if you get past that point and haven't addressed those issues, your milk supply is going to be what it is. And there's not much you can do to increase it after that point.
We're going to cut this interview just a tad short. Not because we don't like Kathy. We actually love her dearly. It's because this interview and this episode is nearing almost an hour already, and we don't like going any more than that. And thankfully, she actually has a lot more to say. We get into some listener feedback questions that we received, and also we're just going to finish the rest of our episode with the normal things that we do, i.e. listener feedback and wins and whines and closing out the show and all the normal things that we do. That will be featured in the next episode that we're going to be putting out, I'd say, within the next couple of days. I know I promised you guys, our beautiful listeners, that all of the listener feedback would be attended to in this particular podcast episode. Unfortunately, I lied. I apologize. You're going to have to wait just a couple more days for all that listener feedback to be brought into this show. So I'm sorry, guys. So you'll be able to get the rest of that information in the next couple of days. You'll hear the closeout of the rest of this show. You get to hear from us once again in a very special second or B-side of this episode. So if you have something to say about what you've already heard, you can always reach us at ParentCastPodcast.com and Facebook at Facebook.com/ParentCast. Also on Twitter at ParentCast. And if you like the Gmail, well, you can get us at ParentCast@gmail.com. Also check out the hotline at 503-454-6730. And if it's good, we'll get it on the air. And as always, if it sucks, you left out. Thanks, guys, and we'll be back in a couple of days.